What is going on, guys? We are here to talk about how to pick the best market for you when it comes to wholesaling real estate. But first, we got to say hello. Ben, what is going on, brother?
Dude, nothing much, nothing much. Just going through the week, staying out of trouble for the most part.
Yeah, good luck with that, man.
I'm trying my
I
best.
Guys, if you don't know who we are, a little bit about myself. My name is Nathan Valley. I've been wholesaling for about 4 or 5 years now. Done a whole bunch of deals, bunch of different states, all over the country. I'm known for locking up over 100 contracts in a single year. Some of you might have seen a 30-day challenge I did a while ago. It's where I picked totally brand new market, no contacts, resources, or anything, and did a $20,000 deal in 30 days without spending any money on marketing. And Ben, who on earth are you, man?
Who the hell am I? Who's this little kid running around? My name is Benjamin. I've been in the marketing space for the last 4 years since I was 15. I primarily do marketing, specifically Facebook and Google ads for real estate investors. And I've worked with some big influencers who some people might know, like Brent Daniels and many, many more. And yeah, I just scale wholesalers, make them a boatload of money for a living.
Love it, brother. Savage. And so, guys, today's topic is pretty fitting because the first step of being able to make boatloads of money when it comes to wholesaling real estate is you got to pick a market.
Correct.
So that's what we're going to go through. So let me bring up my screen here. And guys, we got the super high tech Google Docs.
It
So
has
my
never
favorite-
treated you wrong. Google Docs will never treat you wrong.
That's right. And guys, I apologize in advance, going through a little bit of a cold. So if my voice is a little raspy or you hear the cough drops kind of rolling around, I apologize. But at the end of this, you will know how to pick a market for yourself. So number one, and guys, what's going to be interesting is Ben, you kind of have a different dynamic with this. So it'll be interesting seeing kind of your different perspective on things as we go through this.
Yep.
But number one, guys, when it comes to wholesaling, the most important thing that I look at when I'm going to pick a market is investor activity.
100%.
Right? You got to find the starving crowd. Ben, I think you've heard this story before. There's a gentleman named Dan Kennedy who is known as the godfather of direct response marketing. And he was given a presentation to a crowd one time. And he said, if you could open up a hot dog stand and have any competitive advantage in the world, what would it be? And people start yelling out answers. Oh, I'd want the best recipe for hot dogs. I'd want the nicest hot dog stand. I'd want the best location. And he goes, you're all wrong. He said the only competitive advantage that matters and the only one that you need is having a starving crowd.
Correct.
And guys, as wholesalers, right, we are selling these deals to end buyers, to investors, cash buyers. That is our starving crowd, right? So that's why it's so important for us to where we want to be in a market that has a huge starving crowd, right? Of people that are really, really, really hungry for what we are bringing to the table. I know a lot of times as wholesalers, especially when you're newer or just getting started, we think, oh, well, let me start in a market that's a little bit less competitive. It doesn't really have much guys, competition is your friend. If you're in a competitive market, that's a really good indicator that it's probably a good market to be in, right? Again, because it does not matter. This was one of the lessons I had to learn the hard way. A lot of failures, right? One of the lessons I had to learn the hard way when it comes to wholesaling, it does not matter how good of a deal I have under contract. If I don't have a buyer that is ready, able, and willing to pay me for it, I don't make any money. And one of the biggest lies told in real estate, it's a really popular saying. You probably hear it all the time, and I get triggered every time I hear it. The really popular saying is, oh, if you find a good enough deal, the money or the buyer will find you. Guys, nothing in life works that way. Wholesaling is no different, right? So we got to start with step number one, which is finding the starving crowd. And if you guys also, to take it one step further, have you guys ever wondered, like if you're watching this on YouTube or wherever, chances are this might not be the first wholesaling video you've watched. And if you've seen other people on YouTube or whatever, have you ever wondered or noticed that like all the guru, like they're all in like the same 4 or 5 markets? You can probably name them, right? Where Phoenix, Arizona, Dallas, Texas, Atlanta, Georgia, Florida, right? Like The reason is because those are hot markets that can sustain growing a really big wholesaling company. Now,
So let's dive in further on that, Nathan. Why do you feel like those markets, why do you feel like the gurus are focusing on those markets?
Yeah, well, it's because it has the investor, it has a big enough starving crowd to kind of sustain the amount of volume they want to be doing, right? So if I'm only doing 1 or 2 deals a year, yeah, like you could do 1 or 2 deals a year anywheres, but if I want to be doing, 100, 200, 300, 400 deals a year, guys, I can't do that in the middle of nowhere, right? I need to be in a market that has a lot of activity and a lot of new fresh blood coming in, hungry to invest in this market.
Absolutely.
So that is number one. And guys, one thing to take in mind here when we talk about a starving crowd, right? We had just mentioned like a few of the hottest markets. It doesn't have to be the hottest market, right? You don't have to be in one of the ones I just mentioned. But the most important thing here is you just want to make sure you're not in a bad market. All right. So again, investor activity. And one of my favorite tools for doing that is if you guys are familiar with Privy. Privy is my favorite tool when it comes to picking a market. It is so easy. You guys can look it up. There's a ton of videos we've done with Privy. If you sign up for it, use the code Painlist, you'll get a discount. But Privy, it's pretty simple. It shows you all the investor activity across the entire US. And it's got all these blue bubbles that tell you the number of how many investor deals have been done in every market across the entire US. It's pretty simple. You just pick one with a bubble that's got a big number in it. It's that simple, right? It's not rocket science, guys. So that's number one. The number one most important thing. If that's the only thing you did, you'll be all right. So number two, and I'm really curious to get your feedback on this, Ben. Local versus virtual, right? Should I be in my local market or should I be in my virtual market or be in a virtual market? And I'd say again, see rule number one, right? If your local market, if there's no starving, right? If you're in the middle of nowhere, there's no starving crowd, I probably shouldn't be in your local market.
Exactly.
But for somebody to where they might be in a good market or a decent, curious, Ben, what are your thoughts? Do you think it's better for someone to start out in their local market, so long as it's a decent market, they've got a good starving crowd? Or do you think it's kind of better to do things virtually?
So I have two answers to that, right? So if you're just starting out trying to figure out how to close your first deal, I personally think it would be best to either do your local backyard. Say you're in Houston. I'm in Houston, right? So Houston is very, not saturated, but competitive, meaning that there is money on the table. There's money to be made in Houston. So if I was starting out wholesaling, I would absolutely do my backyard because there's buyer activity. There's a starving crowd, as you would say. But transparently, we work with more established wholesalers where some of the criteria that we look for is they are in virtual markets. They have a dispo process in place with buyers that they can actually take the contracts and bring them to the closing table. So to answer your question directly, if you're starting out and you're in a good market, do your backyard, right? Figure out how to close a few deals. And once you're doing 1 to 2 deals per month consistently, unleash the floodgates, right? Go virtual, go into the good market, because the time it takes and the cost required to scale is just a lot less, right? Because it's cheaper to reach a lot more people. So again, that's just my personal opinion.
No, I love that. You and I are on the same page, and it's funny. I would also, and again, so long as your local market is a relatively decent market for wholesaling, I also would recommend starting local. Now, here's kind of like the twist on my answer. I would recommend starting local, but I would still operate as if I were virtual.
100%.
So the only deal I have done locally was the very first wholesale deal. Ever since then, I don't even know how many deals I've done since then. Everything's been virtual, right? And most of them in markets like that I hadn't even been to or visited. Now, if you're like me, I like doing everything over the phone, in my home, from a computer, right? That's right here chatting with you guys. That's how I like to be closing deals. And you can. And the nice thing is, if you start, like, why start local though, is because especially when you're just getting started, if you do come across an objection or something that does require you to go in person, you have that option to where you can.
Yep.
So, and again, you can still operate virtually in your local market. You can still do everything over the phone and from the computer and all that good stuff. That's how I would do it, right? And how I have always done it. But I would ideally start my local market so that if that seller absolutely was like, no way, not until I meet you in person and you come see the property, or I'm only signing a contract in person, or you have to be the one to get picture, whatever the case may be. If you are local, you've got the ability to where you can do those things and you don't miss out on that first deal or that second deal because of something kind of silly like that. So awesome. Big fan of that. Now 3, I'm really curious to get your opinion on this too. Price. So price point. So one of my issues was one of my first markets. One, there wasn't a lot of investor activity, but number 2, I was getting deals in these markets to where ARV is like 110, 120 maybe. And the problem I came across and the lesson I learned was, guys, like, there's just not a whole lot of room to negotiate a fee, right, for yourself and to make money. And in those lower, like, there's just less money to play with, and they will fight you tooth and nail for every penny. And you typically, it is hard to make profit in those really low price point markets. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that, Ben?
Most of the time I realized that the lower, harder margin deals are typically markets that are like rural, right? Where there's nobody around. That's from an online marketing standpoint, that's what I've noticed, to where those deals are like, yeah, you can get a $5K assignment fee out of it, but it's like you're going through all this crap to get a $5K assignment fee. Is it really worth your time? For me, I personally wouldn't do it because we try to aim for at least a $20K assignment fee for our clients. That's why we try to steer direct metro markets, Metro Atlanta, Metro Houston, like just smack in the middle, where all the money is, right? It's competitive because there's money to be made there. And that again, that's my personal.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. It's again, a lot of times those lower ARVs, that's exactly what I was running into. A lot of those rural markets. And now on the flip side though, right, it's then you got your really high end markets, right? Like areas in California or New York. And you might say, okay, well, I don't want to be in a low price markets. Well, let me go to one of the markets to where, the median price point's over $1 million. There's pros and cons to everything, right? So the pros are, yes, you can definitely get big fees. But I will say, again, competition is your friend, but it's going to take, I would say, more skill, in my opinion, from my experience, with when you're in these higher price point markets. You're dealing with more sophisticated and skilled wholesalers and wholesaling companies and fix and flip companies.
Yep.
And they can be a little bit trickier to negotiate, but if you know how to navigate that process, you absolutely can get some really nice fat checks. And on top of that, the other thing to take into consideration is, in those high price markets, yes, you might get really big checks, but the deals are going to be kind of fewer and far in between, right? Not as consistent.
All those from what we've noticed also take a little bit longer.
Yeah.
So it takes to actually get that deal from a contract to the closing table.
And from an online marketing, from PPC standpoint, they're typically a lot more expensive to acquire as well, right?
Yes, it is, right? A deal in California, the cost per deal there, cost per lead there, cost per click there is going to be a lot higher than an easy market. Like, in my opinion, I think North Carolina is an easy market, right? For example. So
yeah. And so that's why, guys, if you're new or just getting started, it might kind of suit you better to pick a market to where you're not missing out on deals, because, that cost to acquire a deal, yes, that can work out for once you've got those skill sets developed. But if you're not quite there yet, pick a market that's going to be a little bit more favorable to you. And so for me, I actually like markets now with where I'm at right now. I like kind of fewer deals, bigger checks, less headaches. That is nice, but that is not what I would have said a couple of years ago. When I'm just getting started out, I really like something right around the national median price point.
Yep. When you're starting out, you need the reps more importantly. Again, that's hard.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And also the consistency too, especially when getting started. That's a big part of it. And then next up, so those are three kind of things that I really, really kind of take to heart. The moving on from here, this is kind of stacking the chips in your favor. You know, these aren't necessarily deal breakers, but when picking a market, these are things that I like to take into consideration when picking a market. So first one being, is it a title state versus an attorney state? So a title state, simply in order to close a deal, all I need is buyer, seller, and then the title company. That's like the middleman that makes the trade happen. An attorney state, now, fortunately for me, I'm just so blessed to be from the state of New York to where we had an attorney state. And in an attorney state, you get the privilege of where you don't just have a title company, you need an attorney that represents the buyer and an attorney that represents the seller. Now, why does that make any type of difference? Well, a title state, think of a title company as they are simply just that third party person in the middle that's like, hey, I don't really know you and I don't really know you, but you give me the money, I'll make sure it's all there. You give me all the paperwork and stuff for the house, I'll make sure it's good, and I just make the trade happen. I don't really care about anything other than that I just make sure this goes okay.
Yeah.
Well, in an attorney state, you're dealing with attorneys, right? And attorneys, we love you guys, but you know, sometimes it can throw a wrench into things a little bit. So some people have horror stories, but attorney states, you know, one thing is attorneys are known for being notoriously slow, right? They're busy, they got a lot going on, and
by the hour, they're incentivized to be slow.
Right. Yep. And so for wholesaling, right, the whole appeal is, you know, fast money, closing deals quick, you know, fast checks. Yep. It's a lot harder to do that in attorney states. Now, again, there are exceptions to every rule. There are absolutely people that are crushing it in attorney states. But just know that that is going to be an obstacle that you're going to need to figure out and overcome. And also, guys, attorneys, they're going to care about the contracts. You know, that is a hurdle you're going to have to overcome when negotiating with the seller or whoever. You know, they are going to look over those contracts. They are going to want you to make adjustments and changes. And every attorney wants to kind of put their own 2 cents into the contract. So it is what it is. Now, at the same time, guys, every kind of curse can be a blessing in disguise. You know, because there might be a few extra challenges there. Well, there might be some unique advantages because you're able to do deals that other people can't because they don't want to deal with that problem. Again, everything has its pros and cons. It's more of, is that a problem that you want to deal with? Now, next up, we've got disclosure versus non-disclosure state. So think of Texas, right? Texas is a non-disclosure state to where the reason why this matters is as a wholesaler, right? And especially if I'm working virtually, but even if it's locally, how easy is it going to be for me to find comps and information and data on what properties are selling for in my market, right? That's going to play a really big role on when I'm negotiating and making offers and all that stuff. In a non-disclosure state, like Texas, for example, it's not that easy to find that information unless I have a specific connection or a specific tool or resource that allows me to access that information. So again, like we mentioned earlier, Privy actually has direct MLS access. So that kind of checks that box and solves the problem for you. But it is something you're going to want to take into consideration. You know, if I'm in a market to where they disclose everything, then it's really easy for me, you know, to just find, I can use Zillow or whatever the case may be. And it's easy for me to find all the information, what are properties selling for, all that good stuff. Again, not deal breakers, but just something you want to know going into picking your market. Yeah. And then one of the last ones here, I feel like it's kind of underrated a little bit, is time zone. And the reason why I even put this in there is, you know, when picking a market, you got to take into consideration, what is your working schedule going to look like? You know, what hours are you going to be working as a wholesaler? I know we've worked with clients to where they live in California and the only time they have to work on things is in the morning before they go to work. So they chose Florida, right? A market in Florida to where they're able to work, you know, from 6 a.m. to 9, you know, and because it's those are normal hours in Florida, right? That's at 9, starting at 9 a.m. So to whereas if you're making calls at 6 a.m. in California, they're probably going to get some upset people.
Right? Very upset people.
Right. And so whether you're working mornings, night times, whatever the case may be, it's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah.
And then some of the last things for you guys to think about, and again, just kind of big picture stuff, you know, to keep in the back of your head, is the market you're choosing or looking at, is it a, you know, whatever your goals are with real estate, is this a market that you want to be investing in at a later point in time? Right? If you're looking to get into wholesaling and finding deals, there's a lot of people to where they're, hey, you know, wholesaling, this is just kind of a stepping stone for me because, you know, for me to build kind of my own portfolio. Okay, well, then that's going to play a really big part as far as what market you choose, because doing all of that legwork to getting the relationships and all, you know, the market, everything set up. If your end goal is to be buying and acquiring deals, you know, in a specific market, then I would say, depending on the market, you'd probably want to start there with wholesaling, so that all that stuff is working for you. And then also, what unique and competitive advantages do you have, right? Is there a market to where you already have some relationships, you know, or unique connections, you know, whether it's buyers or agents or whoever, or somebody that, you know, that can be a boots on the ground for you, or maybe you've got a connection with family and they work in construction or whatever. There's a whole bunch of kind of things that can kind of go in here, but what unique competitive advantages do you have to keep in mind when picking a market? Because again, that can be really important too. And then lastly, but not least, any specific knowledge or interest. Is it a market, or do you have a market to where, for whatever reason, maybe you grew up there, whatever the case may be, to where you know more than the average person, right? Or it's a market that just really interests you for whatever reason. Again, not the most important thing per se, but again, something to keep in mind. So for me, guys, this is kind of everything that I go through when I'm looking to get started with wholesaling, right? And I'm trying to go from that 0 to 2 to 3 deals per month, and I need to pick a market. This is the exact step-by-step process that I go through. And the answer is going to be a little bit different for each and every one of you, right? Because a lot of this, there's certain principles that we keep in mind, right? And if anything, don't forget the starving crowd, right? Investor activity, that's going to be the most important one. But from there, a lot of it takes into your personal situation, your personal circumstance, because all that stuff is important and it is going to play a role. Now, I'm curious, Ben, for you, it's a little bit different with online marketing and pay.
Little bit.
Yeah, what are kind of some of those differences?
I would say the biggest thing is, for the clients that we are working with, we're trying to figure out what are the least and highest leverage things we can do to take a client from 2 deals per month to 10 deals per month in the shortest time possible. First biggest thing, obviously, is market, right? It's hard to do a market, especially 10 deals, if you're in your backyard and it's a rural area. It just is, right? If you can, props to you, right? So we have data as to some of the best markets in the entire country for our clients, and best markets in each state for our clients. And what we do is we ask them, hey, where do you have buyers right now? Most of them are in some sort of coaching program and have a decent network of people. So we just start out with the states and we're like, hey, these are where the best markets are. Let's go into these, right? Because my philosophy is we want to cast the big net and pinpoint where it bites, right? Which markets bite, and then we're able to hone down into those best performing markets and just scale them. So that's what we do on the online marketing side.
I love that. And, you know, guys, one of the things is that also really, really comes into play with what Ben's talking about is, you know, with what we're talking about here with picking a market, again, as far as what you're doing for lead generation, there's so many different choices. We actually just did a video on that kind of last week that you guys can find and watch. But one of the really big things that Ben, and when getting into pay-per-click and online marketing, that you have to take into consideration is the cost. The cost per lead. That is so important. When you're brand new, you're able to be really efficient and really effective, and there's a lot of different means to getting deals. But when you start kind of scaling into online marketing and some of these more expensive strategies, picking a market, a lot can come down to, well, what does it cost me to acquire a lead, to acquire a deal, to get a contract, in a certain market? Would you say that?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I absolutely agree.
Love it. Well, guys, that is the guide to picking a market. Ben, any last questions, comments, concerns, anything to leave the people before we let them go?
No, besides the fact that marketing, or the market you're in, is probably the biggest determiner of your success, right? Regardless of what marketing channel you're doing, whether that's outbound, that's cold calling, VAs, text blasting, whatever it is, or online marketing, that is by far the most important factor to determine your success, right? In my opinion, the most important are what market you're in, the volume you're putting in, so how many dollars are you making versus, or how much are you spending, and how persistent you are to making sure it works. So that's my opinion.
Love it. Love it. I couldn't agree more. Guys, you could be doing all the right things.
Yep.
But again, if you're in the wrong market, it's not going to make a difference. So make sure you're in the right market. Now you know how. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Hope this was able to be helpful for you. If you want to learn more about kind of what we do and how we help people, you can go to painlessflipping.com. There should be a link in the description. And Ben, if people want to learn more, find out more about you, where can they do that?
They can find me on Instagram. It's just official Benjamin, and then my last name. I'll probably be the first one there.
Love it. Cool. Well, thank you so much, guys. Have a great weekend. We'll see you all soon.
See ya.